All right, happy Friday, everybody. We've got a big show to discuss the crypto markets today. This week in crypto on a pre-recorded schedule today instead of streaming. We'll be back to our normal schedule next week. And then we'll probably have one more pre-recorded and then business as usual come the second week of May. So lots to uncover today. It's been a rather flat week in terms of market prices, but that doesn't mean there hasn't been a ton going on. Obviously, Trump and the US are continuing to put the pressure on the rest of the world in terms of getting their way on tariffs. That has gone kind of a mixed direction depending on who you ask. Trump himself is discussing, as I can show you here, how he believes it's going great, and the US is taking in record numbers in tariffs with the cost of almost all products going down, including gas, groceries, and just about everything else. Likewise, inflation is down. Promises made, promises kept. Okay, many people are buying into this, of course. He certainly has supporters. There are many people who think this is a signal to traders and investors, like has been kind of the game for the past 2.5 weeks, where he tells everyone that the economy is going really well, and then retailers pour in money, and then he drops a bombshell about something not going well and how he's seeking retaliation or retribution against a country's leadership, and then everything goes down. So yes, it's tough to say depending on what your political views are, whether you're even in the US or not. Almost everyone has an opinion on Trump because he's such a polarizing personality with polarizing policies, and that is your prerogative to decide what to do. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you what your opinion should be on how much integrity or authenticity all of his words should have right now. What I can say is you need to be very much in tune with what actual policies are going into effect and understand that words either coming from the US or from Japan, like they did today, where they kind of mocked Trump a bit and stated that they can't negotiate because of the bad precedent that it would set. China, they're all coming out with different opinions and words, but understand that the only things that really make a true mid or long-term difference on the markets are the policy changes, like the policy change made on April 2nd, where he did announce the tariffs, right? And April 9th, when they went into effect. Those are the things that matter the most, and understand that the big market swings that happen when Trump or anyone else speaks on social media or on a newscast, it's for the purpose of future negotiations 9 times out of 10. Even the news about him and Jerome Powell and how he wants Powell to go away. I'll pull it up right now. Just by typing in Trump Powell, you'll see plenty of news about him wanting to replace Jerome Powell with Bill Hwang for Fed chair. Someone who would, of course, be more cooperative with what Trump wants and likely cut rates. He has threatened to remove Jerome Powell the day after Powell said he would not cut rates. That was a big story this week. And obviously, many people believe that a lot of these tariffs and the threats of future higher tariffs are all for the purpose of cutting rates. I don't blame them for thinking this. The truth is really impossible to uncover unless you're sitting in the White House with him in his inner circle. But there is a lot of signaling going on in terms of what he is actually trying to accomplish, whether it was all for the purpose of cutting rates, which of course would bolster the economy and make stocks and cryptocurrency by association surge. And of course, Trump has not been shy about stating how much of a hand he has in both. So take that with a grain of salt. And going back to the price changes and the social volume changes, you can see that the overall market cap in crypto saw a pretty slight decline. 1.3% drop is not much, especially compared to the previous couple weeks, which really showed, well, it depends. The first week after the tariffs were implemented, we saw, of course, that historic dump and people were panicking, as they probably should have, because these tariff policies did change the course of the way stocks and cryptocurrency markets can move. And then we saw the volume over the past week going down over 50%. This has been a trend. The first week after the tariffs were implemented, it actually went up. Then it actually declined a bit the week after and declined a lot this past week. So trading volume wise, this is kind of a reflection of people just not being sure what they want to do, and hodling or holding being the best priority for people right now, because it's the only solution that the average retailer is comfortable with, considering the conditions we're in and the uncertainties and unknowns that are completely based on policy changes and not, the usual support and resistance levels that many TA traders out there rely upon, or even some of the fundamental indicators that we'll go over here on this show. Social volume wise, you can also see there's just less talk overall. This is kind of a representation of the fact that prices haven't moved much. When you see Bitcoin in the gray, basically break even, up 0.66%, you're usually going to see a decline in discussion, because Bitcoin is rather boring compared to the usual movement that it has. It's kind of ranged between that 82 up to the 86K range over the past week. I don't even know if it broke it once. And other social volumes are pretty similar. Ethereum down a lot, XRP down a lot. Solana's doubled in social volume. I'm still a little weary about this one. It's been on the trending coin list like all week long at number one. I'm pretty sure there's some bot activity that's skewing stuff right now. So take it with a grain of salt. It's also seeing just overwhelmingly bullish sentiment, despite the fact that its price is only up 10%. I do see that is a pretty significant deviation from the rest of the market, so I understand why there can be some positivity. But when you see something on this level where it's 91% positive, there's probably some nefarious stuff going on to bolster the perception of Solana right now. Doesn't mean you should like it or dislike it anymore. Just understand that the stats of this particular asset might be a bit artificial. All right, another thing to mention should be the fact that gold has continued to surge. Obviously, many in crypto are hoping that it can take on the reputation of digital gold. But so far, the biggest beneficiary of the chaos surrounding tariffs and Trump's threats to replace the leader of the Fed, gold is the hedge that people traditionally have gone to, and that has not changed even in 2025, as evidence is showing. Now, crypto has had a nice bounce. I mean, since the April 8th bottom, when people were really starting to freak out and the retaliations between China and the US were peaking, this was when many people panicked. And of course, as usual, when people panic on such a unanimous level, prices tend to rise because markets move the opposite direction of the crowd's expectations. And I would still argue that it's pretty in line with the S&P. Obviously, there are many hours where the S&P is closed and crypto isn't, so you're going to see some deviation during those times. But just going back to the last month, it's been pretty consistent. S&P goes up, so does crypto. S&P goes down, so does crypto, and it has not stopped yet. I would expect if crypto has a nice weekend, S&P was off today, by the way, because it was Good Friday. But if crypto goes up this weekend, the S&P probably is going to be up a little Monday. And if it's not, it's going to drag down crypto. That's kind of just the way of the land these days, and has been the case since arguably early 2022, when the Fed began raising interest rates and then cutting them in 2023 and 2024 before they stopped at the end of the year of 2024. Other things to keep in mind. So let's see if we can make this a little smaller. There we go. So this is just a little social volume graph using the My Narratives tab, which you can find by going to Social Trends and clicking on My Narratives. You can see Jerome Powell was the latest spike, still not really near the level of social volume that the tariffs and China have taken on, especially when it was peaking around the 8th of April. But you can see over the past, 10 days or so, even these big topics have declined significantly, and they're kind of on the same level as Jerome Powell these days, because that's the latest news about him not cutting rates despite the traders and Donald Trump's hopes. So yeah, call it just fast moving news cycles, but tariffs in China are starting to become stagnant news, probably because there just hasn't been enough significant updates. There certainly have been updates with further retaliations and raised tariff threats between the two countries, US and China, and East Asian countries getting in on their opinions, and the EU a little bit as well. But just nothing compared to the chaos that really began at the beginning of April and the subsequent first week or so. Donald Trump and Elon Musk, you can see, I mean, they do get consistently discussed. I just wanted to throw them in because they're two of the most mentioned names in crypto, and probably will continue to be, at least until Trump's term comes to an end in just under 4 years from now. So just keep that in mind. If you ever want to make your own narratives, it's a really cool tool that can be more of a expansive version of what you see on these charts, where you can do more of like a simple bar chart with the price of Bitcoin next to it. Here I have lower or below versus higher or above. Blue I typically make as the good one, the one you want to see spiking above the other if you want to see prices moving up, and red is the one that tends to be bad for markets. And you can see the big spikes in lower or below across social media were spiking right around the 6th to the 9th when the tariff fears were at their peak. That, of course, was the perfect time to buy, as everyone was spamming that they thought crypto and stocks were going to go lower. Since that time, we've actually seen a little bit of domination from higher or above. And it's been pretty consistent since April 11th or so. And you can see how crypto just has not been able to crack right around that 86K resistance that it hasn't seen since right before the tariffs were announced on April 2nd. So look for a little more fear or maybe complacency or impatience coming from the crowd, which would be represented by high blue spikes here as a good buy signal. And that's what I know a lot of bullish people on sentiment are waiting for right now. You can even break it down by platform. Just as a reminder, you can see, on Telegram, there was a big greed signal that just happened. Reddit's been pretty consistent. They're a little bit bullish still. X/Twitter is a lot more flat between the two. 4chan, of course, has been a big story because it ceased to operate as of Monday. Who knows? Some people are hoping for a comeback, but right now it's not looking good. So we may just no longer have 4chan data because 4chan is no longer having discourse for the time being. Bitcoin Talk, pretty big bullish bias, and then Farcaster, back and forth, pretty flat, kind of like X and Twitter/Twitter. Another social volume update would be this one, probably the one I check on the most. It's the overall mentions of lower prices for Bitcoin, which I've set between 10K to 69K for the time being, and higher prices, which I've set between 100K to 159K. And then I also included the round number of 250K because there's been a little bit of an increase in discussions around that number. For the most part, it looks similar to the higher or lower chart. Lots of blue spikes around the bottom. Since that time, a little more neutral, a slightly better picture if you value this one a little more. I probably do myself. The latest was a little bit of a fear spike right here. So that's a decent sign, and you do see that it was correct and we had a slight boost afterwards. But I would anticipate the weekend is going to be pretty slow and continue this price pattern. Monday is, of course, the day where we might hear some big news, or it could be this weekend. You never know. Trump did make an announcement last weekend about easing up some tariffs, or at least there was a rumor about it, and then he like corrected it on Monday. It was very interesting regarding like the tech specific products and goods being imported to the country from other countries. Let's go over to some statistics. One more thing on the sentiment side of things. Positive sentiment is still overpowering the negative, according to just raw positive versus negative commentary. So this kind of agrees with the higher versus lower chart we looked at. Our algorithm is basically taking all of the chat mentions going on and, deeming something like Bitcoin to the moon as a bullish comment, obviously, or Bitcoin is a scam as a negative comment. Anything that has the word Bitcoin or BTC will be classified within this chart. And the gold, basically the higher up the gold is, the more worried you should be, kind of like what we saw here when people were getting greedy in late March. And the more confident you should feel is based on when it gets super low down here. So, if you called this roughly the middle line, maybe a little higher, anything above starts to look a little greedy. Anything below looks a little bit fearful. And yeah, we've had 3 days in a row of a bit of greed, and it's climbing too. So that's a concern to me. Another thing before we go over to some other Bitcoin metrics and maybe a few altcoins, I looked up the main public World Liberty Financial wallet, which currently holds about $76 million of crypto in it, between about 50 different tokens. I've plotted the top 4, 2 of which are traditional cryptocurrencies and 2 are stable coins. You can see Ethereum here in red. It really has not moved much. I'm looking at I'll even zoom in a little to 3 months here to make it a little easier. Let's even go more zoomed in to get rid of all those spikes. So this gives a clear view. So Ethereum essentially hasn't moved, and neither has wrapped Bitcoin. That's a good sign. So if you're worried that Trump and his administration may have a plan for crypto to send it down or up, and there, some sort of insider trading going on there, this would confirm that they're not really moving much at all. They feel confident. And the argument might be, yes, there's other wallets out there that we don't know about. We can only go with what we know, and that's showing that the balances are pretty flat here. Meanwhile, stable coins, we actually saw a big jump in dry powder, specifically USD coin. They added $25 million worth. After only holding about $1.19 million, it was suddenly $26.19 million. And this was a couple days after they announced the tariffs. So this was basically a sign that they wanted to add some buying power for when the time happened. But so far, we haven't really seen at least major buys. I don't want to go through every single one of these assets, but if there was some dip buying after the prices went down, it's at least not showing in the major tokens that he was holding. And I looked at like Staked ETH, White, Move, Ondo, these main ones up here too. They didn't change at all. Also, we need to mention whales. And what we're seeing is actually a kind of a promising sign. The 10 plus BTC wallets that are going to include exchange wallets and liquidity providers. It's a bit of an over macro look at just the largest wallets in crypto. We can at least say that they have been moving up consistently since March 3rd. So call it about 7 weeks now, where they've moved up pretty consistently. To be exact, they've added about 28,175, if I round up that number, more BTC. So that's a 0.17% increase. Meanwhile, the 10 to 10,000 BTC wallets, which is a little more of a precise measurement, but still, I understand it has plenty of exchange wallets included in that range. 10,000 BTC is a gigantic number, but it's at least excluding like the main Binance wallets, and the ones that are just there to ensure liquidity is not a problem. They've looked a little bit better since the 7th of April. You can see when the tariffs were first announced, they did dump. And obviously, their dump ended up being a pretty good time frame as coincided with the price. And then beginning on the 7th, they accumulated, and their accumulation was well timed, as it usually is. They added about 15,440 more BTC in the past 10 days, and the price has gone up about 11% during that time. So I still believe that the 10 to 10K line, through a lot of different experimenting and trial and error, my unofficial opinion is that this is a pretty good range that loosely correlates with the midterm fluctuations of prices. So good news on both fronts, depending on which line you value more. From an on-chain statistical perspective, let's go back 3 months here. In terms of just network movement for Bitcoin, transaction volume, kind of stagnant. It's not dropping off a cliff or anything, but this is pretty much the normal level. I could even make this like a weekly signal so you don't see the weekend dips as much. Let's try not making the price a week and do that. Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty consistent. Even going back like a year, you can see that the peak all happened at the end of 2024. And basically, it's kind of followed the price. And since mid-March, it's flattened out. So we're at least not dipping anymore. This is an incomplete week, so don't worry about that. And then going down, this is a little bit too, let's actually just look at the moving averages for these three. Keep that one on. And take that off. There we go. So we do see that active addresses from a 30-day smooth moving average perspective is continuing to dip. The network growth is also continuing to dip, and circulation has really dipped. So we saw with transaction volume, it's staying flat, but this is concerning. I mean, I don't love the fact that the amount of unique addresses and the amount of unique tokens are dipping. Network growth, to its credit, has looked a little bit better in April. So there's a slight increase in new Bitcoin wallets being created this month compared to the free fall that we were seeing the first quarter of the year. MVRV, always a very important metric. 30-day average returns sit at about plus 1.5%. 365 is at about 0.2%, pretty much as even as you're going to get. They're not really leaning too overvalued or undervalued right now, meaning if you're relying on probabilities of trying to get in at a risk-free time or try to sell at a scary, extra risky time, neither opportunity is available right now. We need to see which direction prices are going to start skewing. If we stay flat, for what it's worth, you'll see the MVRVs start to dip into negative range because of the fact that so many people were buying in the last 3 to 6 months during the ultra FOMO stretch after Trump was first elected in early November, all the way up until the top when he was inaugurated. Funny how that works out. Funding rate, let's zoom in just a tiny bit here to see it better. I'll just look at Binance and BitMEX. Beginning with BitMEX, it's pretty much flat at the moment. Binance, slight bullish bias. A little more longs than there are shorts right now. That's not ideal. It kind of reflects what we looked at for the overall sentiment of Bitcoin, which is a little overly bullish right now. So when there's a bit of a bullish bias like this tends to correlate with price tops. It's not extreme enough to be super worried, but you can see, in these cases here, there was a price top on this level, even this level here. This was a little more flat at least, but you want to be seeing extreme shorts like we saw at the end of March. Of course, they didn't know that the Trump announcement would happen here and then demolish markets for a week and a half or so. But at least right here, this was a great buy opportunity, at least for the short term, for about 3 days. Whales are mostly staying pretty flat right now. Expect a bit of a dip because the weekend is kicking off here soon, but not much going on in terms of whale activity. But as we saw, when there is activity, there's a little more accumulation than dumping, which is a good sign. Nothing special going on with mean dollar invested age. I love this metric as a good mid to long term indicator. You want to be seeing big dips, a lot bigger than these. If I go back a year, this is the kind of validation you want to see if you're looking for a bull market. The dip right here on October 6th and 7th literally was the signal to buy, and it kicked off a mean dollar invested age curve drop that lasted up until arguably right around the inauguration, which was the top. The average age of Bitcoin sitting in wallets dropped about 21% during that time as a bunch of dormant wallets were becoming active and bringing coins back into circulation to be moved around, and increase network activity, which ultimately is what generally will pump up prices the best. Age consumed, nothing really too special going on as of late. So this mean dollar age curve going up is the concern because it means that coins are getting more and more stagnant. And as we saw, there is kind of an increase in hodling and not doing much at all right now. And that's why transaction volume is a little bit down, and daily active addresses and circulation are down. Supply and exchanges is good news. We are still seeing that coins are moving off exchanges at a pretty healthy rate. We're sitting at about 1.47 million of BTC on exchanges after nearly 6 months ago. It was at about 2.01. So that's a drop of 533,300 or so BTC moving off exchanges over nearly 6 months ago. 26.5% drop. That's a good sign. But again, this is kind of a reflection of the fact that people are hodling at an increased rate right now. Social volume overall toward Bitcoin is declining. As we saw in the screener, there was a pretty big drop over the past week as people are just waiting for something to happen and for us to get out of this ranging period. And then RSI is sitting at about 52, just barely above the break-even point. Ideally, you want to be buying when it's under 50 and taking a little profit when it's above 50. But 52 is about as break-even as you'll typically see. Total amount of holders, as we saw from another metric, there is an increase in network growth, meaning the total amount of holders is moving up. Call it a little bit of an increase in confidence that's been going on over the past 10 days because prices moved up around 11% or so. Ideally, we actually want to see something like this where amount of holders are dropping because retailers are freaked out and no longer interested in holding their Bitcoin. And that's about it for Bitcoin metrics. A few other things to show here. I covered these. Alpha narratives. So updated today. It updates every Friday for those interested. Just go to, in order to get to it, go to social trends here, click on the alpha narratives tab, and then click explore the narratives, and you'll see the same chart that I'm showing now. Big increase lately in AI. OpenAI surpasses Google as the likely leader for the best AI model. Deepfake technology, cloning voices, raising fraud fears, trading bots using reverse image search for trend analysis. Kind of scary news, to be honest. I know there are people who know a lot more about the latest with AI than myself, but it is an increasing trending topic right now that has been circulating the crypto sphere over the past week and even the last couple of days. Another big spiking topic was whales. This is actually the biggest spike I've seen in whale talk in about a month. Whales are buying and accumulating large amounts of Bitcoin. That does appear to match what we're seeing on our platform. Whales holding onto their Bitcoin and not selling also matches. Increase in long-term holder supply of Bitcoin. Smart money stacking sats and accumulating Bitcoin sats stands for Satoshi. Shift in trader sentiment towards caution, Ethereum fundamentals conflicting with market behavior, large transactions of Ethereum to exchanges. This is all basically about Bitcoin and Ethereum whales. It seems to be mostly a positive narrative being formed around BTC whales and a slightly concerned narrative around Ethereum whales, probably because Bitcoin is performing better over the past week or past 10 days, I should say, while Ethereum is one of the most underperforming altcoins out there over the last couple of years. So makes sense why those two are the biggest topics in association with whales. Art is also getting a little bit of an uptick, not enough to be too notable compared to back here, but if you're into NFTs and some of the art associated projects with crypto, this might interest you. Slight uptick here in XCN as well. Yeah, and those are kind of the big spikes. Bitcoin is doing its usual fluctuations and social volume slightly down. It was getting talked about a lot more when it was volatile at the beginning of the week than it is now. A few more things. We mentioned the Solana dominance, but we should also mention the fact that NFT, which is probably trending due to the fact that the ticker NFT is associated with art. As we saw, it's getting a bit of an uptick over the past 24 hours. Bitcoin at number 3. SUSD, which is an altcoin. I'll do it this way so it's a little easier to see. Which is a synthetic USD stablecoin. And it experienced a severe depeg from its intended one-to-one value. So that's pretty big news if you've been following that. POL/USDT, Crypto.com, which is their native token, LBR, Masa, Chainlink is up there right now, and WeMix. So these are the top 10 that are trending at the moment. The Bitcoin ETF dashboard, keep in mind this is completely free. I definitely recommend keeping tabs on it because there is definitely a correlation with price when you see overall net inflows versus net outflows. You can see all of the net outflows that were happening right as the tariff announcements hit. Big movement away from crypto during that initial week. And then it got flat as Bitcoin began to rebound. There was actually a rise, then a big drop. And the latest day before markets closed today, we saw another big inflow. This was actually the biggest inflow since the day before Trump made his tariff announcements. So that's good news heading into the weekend here. Last but not least, I did a quick check on some of the largest centralized exchange inflows going on. And I like to look, if you sort by total dollars, it's going to be dominated by Ethereum, and First Digital USD is always up there. Mantra has still been, a frequent mainstay. But I like to sort by percentage of market cap. And it's showing me that Blur token actually had over 1% of its entire market cap moved to centralized exchanges in a single transaction, moving to Coinbase Prime. So that's usually a concern if you're holding Blur or something like ApeCoin, Eurocoin. Mantra obviously is still going to be scattered among them. Movement, which is a top 100 market cap asset. It's had a few big transactions I've checked over the last couple of days. Crypto.com. These are kind of the ones that are at risk because you're seeing a huge surge of coins and percentage of their market caps moving to centralized exchanges, meaning there's a little bit of an increased risk of a potential sell-off. So that's a little recap, folks. I hope this was helpful. I hope everyone has a wonderful Easter weekend here, whether you celebrate or not. Stay safe out there. Remember that, our hypothesis about the markets is that it's very dependent on real world news and global economic, macroeconomic news that's coming out right now. So fundamentals are still important, but remember that everything can change in the snap of a finger if Trump or China or another country makes a severe move related to these tariffs, or if Jerome Powell perhaps gets removed from his position. Those are the kinds of things that are just going to flip everything on its head and potentially start a huge domino effect that changes all the fundamentals, changes the TA targets, and then we've got a whole new ballgame. But based on what we know now, slightly bullish bias. I would expect it stays a little flat and potentially declines a bit to start the week based on what we know now. But that's, of course, not investment advice, and it's a complete guess just based on the information we have available. So take it all with a grain of salt. Hopefully you're continuing to learn how to use these tools for your own trading as we walk through the markets like this. That's kind of the purpose, along with giving an update on the markets. And yeah, that's about it from me. Please leave comments, guys. Let us know what you think about this analysis, questions you may have going into next week, and we definitely read them and we'll take them into account. Thanks as always. Talk to you soon.